Yeah, we should be live and direct right now. Boom! Good try, Dirty Babylon. You can kill what can never die. We're back live and direct on the Tru-Mon Show with Arthur and Fiona. How are you guys?
We're
Good.
well, thank you.
Great.
Thanks for.
Tonight, eh?
I was just saying it was the spur of the moment
Yeah,
to add to what would happen the other day, and yeah, try and see whether we can complete this series.
that's it. I think there's a lot to say, and that's what I was starting to read some stuff that you gave me, and I was making a reflection on my own, and I was like, the fantasy is so deep, so deep. Sometimes the even. Yeah, I was and I was laughing alone, waiting for you. I was laughing, just thinking about how my fantasy also is huge, and I'm conscious of it just by coming here on YouTube, doing what I'm doing, Tru-Mon, and this like all this is fantasy. And I'm very conscious, but I was laughing about it because what else do I have other than my dream in life to do something for humanity, to have better days. And so I have no choice. I have to be compromised somehow into a shit stem and do the best I can. But I'm very conscious that our fantasy is so huge. It's huge. Even me, I was laughing that, you got to get to that point where don't start freaking crying and freaking out because you live in a fantasy world. Just recognize it. Try to, limit your interaction with the fantasy world. And I think it's a good way to reconnect and start going back home, because that's what we're doing, each and everyone going back home. But yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on again tonight. We'll have a great discussion. Again, that was very spontaneous. You get to me and Yannick, I got an insight. Wake up, I need you. So I was there, and for sure, I'm always, Bob Marley said, the people that are spending their time making this world worse are not taking days off. So anytime I'm always there. It's for the benefit of us all that we do this, and it's nothing personal. Like, it's just something that needs to be done. I think it's something humanity, probably a lot of people can benefit from the talk we have had here, and they're all from the heart, from my heart, from your hearts. So it's all stuff that's done with love, and if people are activate their mind, they will catch our drift very fast, and that we're not here to brain. If we're gonna brainwash you into something, is to think for yourself. This is what I said this morning on my other channel. If you stay too long, if you hang around for too long here on we'll brainwash you to think for yourself, because this is what we need. Even the thinking for yourself is also to not fall into the fantasy of another person's dream. That's very important, and that's what you're gonna extend on. Arthur, I think I read a bit the stuff, but it's always
Yeah,
refreshing to read what you guys write all the time. I go outside in the sun, I sit, I put my music, and I take your papers and I read, and I love it because it's refreshing. It's I feel like I'm not freaking alone to feel fucked up. That's the thing, is we recognize how fucked up we are, and we're able to talk about it. But people sometimes avoid, because of self-obsession, all the stuff we have talked about, avoid that look at themselves. It's time to check ourselves. It's time to check ourselves. That's the title of my next Tru-Mon Show with TV Culture. It's time to check ourselves. Yeah.
interesting.
Go ahead, Arthur.
I was just going to say the Love for Life insights is like spring, where when you come to these insights, you experience this growth, and then you come to summer, and there's this euphoria of celebration. But then comes autumn, when you realize, fuck, okay, well, now I've really got to do something about it. And now, like we were talking about the other day, now we've got to face this thing and kill it. We got to kill it, right? Murder it. And the only way you can do it is to not wrestle with it, and not, like we said the other day, don't play with the pieces of the puzzle, because the devil is in the detail. And this is devil incarnate. We are possessed by this demonic entity, that are thought forms, constructs, concepts, definitions that define a fake view of reality that we're looking through. So the Love for Life insights that take us into autumn is about, okay, now we've got to let go. Now comes the rule letting go. And then comes this solemn winter where we've got to let all that falling collapse to become compost. So the system will collapse. Everything will come down to be recycled. And the only thing that can rise up again will be the living without the system. So there won't be any more motor cars or free energy technology. All this will go. It's inevitable. And all those who resist it, all those who continue to hang on to the system will go with fantasy. They'll be gone because it has no place in the living dream. This is a fake dream, which we'll talk about in today's show. We'll get into this stuff and, you know, and how the invisible cage of the good-hearted continues recycling the lie, the original sin of the lie, which is a curse, because the lie is a curse and the original sin is a curse. And the curse is doing harm under the guise that we're doing the right thing, doing the devastation to reality, to the living dream, under the name of God, or in faith of God, or in love of God, or in hope of God, that we will overcome poverty, that we'll overcome malnutrition.
That's why they kill in the name of God too. They go out and kill in the name of God. You know, we do everything in the name of God.
We do, and we, you know, why we get in the car and destroy, and why we send our children to school, because we think we're doing the right thing, and all we're really doing is devastating the living soul of the living man, because that's all we can do, which we'll get into it. So, you know,
it's interesting what you just said. We do it in the name of God, because obviously there are the religious people who literally do it in the name of the God they believe in, but we all do it in the name of God in terms of whatever our God is, whether it's materialism, whether it's new age, whether it's environmentalism, whether it's business. We all have this God that we use to justify what we're doing and to justify the harm.
Well, in fact, the God is the name of the man. The God is the
but I
name.
think we can all agree that collectively, even collectively, everyone thinks that nobody today thinks that there's a God for the moon, a God for the sun. You know, like it was in ancient times, everyone pretty much believed that there's one God. So we're all killing and doing all kinds of nonsense in the name of that same God, but in different religions, it's interpreted differently, I guess.
Well, see, Satan,
I see.
So what, Satan is a man, because all thoughts are man-made, like we talked about in the previous shows, that it's always man to the thought. It's always man to the experience. There's no experience or thought without man being first party to the experience. It's impossible to bring forward a thought or experience without a man being a party to the thought or to the experience. So everything is to man. Everything is man-made. So the definitions are God. So when we worship the definition that defines a religion, you know, and it doesn't, the religion can come as government, law, politics. It doesn't matter how it comes. Institutes, think tanks, you know, cults, societies, you know, punk rock, Rastafarianism, rock and roll. You know what I mean? There's a fashion. There's so many. That is God. So we worship the definition. And in worshiping the definition, we're practicing devastation and destruction to the living dream of man's life, because that's all we can do. And that's because we are confused. We don't know the true living heart of the man has been blinded. We're blinded to it. We can't sense it. And this comes back to the difference between sense and nonsense, and what we shared in the early shows about how the penny dropped for us when we realized there was a massive difference between direct sensory experience, where we form living dreams uniquely that are original to each of us in our interactions with reality, and or the nonsense where we allow others to define the experiences we are having. So they tell us that this life form that we're sensing is a yellow and is daffodil, and gives us scientific explanation. So we then raise up the definition as our God. So every time we come to that life form, we have the God of the definition in control of the experience we're having. Now, if the information containing in the God of the definition directs us to pull that plant out and dirt it and destroy it, or in this case, to go to a forest that we've defined, rip down the forest and rip out the essence of the soul of the forest and turn it into steel and plastic and make motor cars and dig down to the bowels of the earth and bring up oil and coal and all this stuff, and run around in this technological industrial revolution age. It is this worship of the God of definition that we have raised up. And we're doing it in a state, under a state of nonsense, because we're not sensing anymore, because these are not our dreams. A child brought up by nature, with no man inside the child's head defining the experience the child is having, the child forms its unique experience and builds the dream of the sensations of its life around it. So all the information is formed by the child and not by us. And so that's a living dream. And when there is no implanting of definitions and constructs and concepts included, the child has no nonsense to default to. And if there's no default to, there is no other dream to hijack the child. So there is no way we fall into the dream of another man's definition to worship that dream. You see? So when we worship God, we are worshiping a definition defined by another man. And that man's dream may contain a universe or a library of information. Right? So for example, when we arrive in the mother's womb, we're already defined because mum and dad may have already worked out the name that they're using for the body of this vessel we're going to arrive out of the womb, or whether they make up the name after when they're clear on whether it's male or female, or whether it's going to be transgendered, you know, whatever. But the point is that at some point we are marked with the definition of the name. But the name that we are given, that's registered as the birth certificate, the vessel on the ocean of definition, because we're sailing through the seas of definition, because the libraries are full of definition, defining everything, with more coming at us all the time. Constant influx of definition, none of it being our living dream. So the mark of the beast, that is, which we made in a video years ago, but the name is the straw man, you know, which is the mark of the beast. And the point we're getting at is that these definitions seduce us, if we accept them, into the dream world of another man's making. And we start to sail inside it with the rules and regulations and the conditions and all that come with that definition. So the name defaults us to the system because it is the invention of another man's dream. And so we are inside the encyclopedia. We're inside the library books of the law, of the occults, everything that was defined through the mysteries of Babylon, everything of all the secret societies that were unfolding, and all the alchemy that's involved into system science of today comes at us. So we're sailing on the seas of hell, and we are ostracized, we are discriminated against, and we're being censored from allowing us to unfold the living dream of the living soul uniquely by each of us, being brought up by nature with no one inside our heads defining anything for us, right? And we say that because the interaction we have with nature stimulates us, because we're smelling it, we're hearing it, we're touching it, we're feeling it, right? We're tasting it. So these sensations expand the living dream of the living soul. And that's God. That's the true God. Because that's what we are in our true essence. And as we said yesterday in the other videos, when we sense who we are is there. It's not here in the name. Arthur Cristian. The fantasy, the vessel of fantasy. Because in the system, the name you have really is the vessel of fantasy. And fantasy is the devil incarnate possessing you, because the definitions are the instructions that make you move your arms and move your legs, open your mouth and talk, that get you up out of bed every day, that get you doing everything you do in the system, performing the rituals. All the while, your good heart is confused. You are confused with it. You're severed from it, because you think that all the definitions that you still sense all around you, the living, is of your good heart. But the definitions where everybody's worshipping them, because everyone has a name, everyone has a career and a title, and a name can be mum, housewife, living in the suburbs of Sydney, in my mother's case, Bronte, and her life as a Greek Orthodox woman, and the interaction she has with the Greek church, which is a huge part of her cultural, occultic designed life, the platform, the foundation, right? She keeps defaulting to it. She keeps stepping back. So she wakes up as Anthula, my mother, as the Black Witch fantasy. Bless her heart. She's not a Black Witch, but she's confused. She lives for the definitions that have defined a fake version of reality that is not her living dream. So all her life energy feeds the grid, feeds the information highway of the system, which is all gathered up by the maker, the inventor, and the administrators and the authorities of the system dream. Because that's where all your life energy goes. It goes to the makers, to the copyright holders, in this case, the crown. Because under the crown, you've got every church, you've got every religion, you've got all the new age, you've got everything and everything happening in the system under the crown. So they gather all the slave labor, all the life force energy of everyone who are performing the inculcation of the emotions, right? The compelling instructions of everyone out there, including my mother, including you and me. And this is our fallen state. And this is our marriage with fantasy and the vow we have given to death. Because the moment we've accepted the ticket of the birth certificate, the definition of the name, we are already on the journey of death, because that is our destination. We have agreed to commit suicide to the living soul that we've been gifted the opportunity to create in this life, as this life, to forsake it, to reject it, and to live the lie under the original sin, processing the curse by living out the definitions, right, of everyone who performs fantasy, their fantasy. So the only destination you have is death. That is your marriage vow. That is your marriage certificate to your partner. That is the death certificate to your death. That is the driver's license, the car registration. That was the birth certificate your mother formed with your father when they registered the vessel of fantasy in the system. So that's why they send your child to their school to go through the production line. You must be defined. You must not be allowed to be a living soul. You must never have a unique original dream. The only dreams you will have are the ones we give you. And all of them are synthetic. And that's all you will know. And the language you will talk will be the performance of your whole life as that curse being processed. You will die without a unique soul. So the occultists know this. All the high-level occultists know the truth of this. That's why they do it. And that's why they keep adapting these tactics. Because they want to kidnap the vessel. Because we all create the vessel. We call them children, babies. And then the occultists can do whatever they like to the vessels because we hand them over to Mrs. Occultist, Fiona, Cristian of the OTO. And now she will raise up. She's going to raise up my child under her authority because she's now a representative of the definitions I've accepted as my God. So she's the God and the authority and the representative of what will define my child's reality. So she may decide to transgender my child. You know, she will take him to their preschool. Well, I actually take him to their preschool under their authority because they control the law. And if I don't, I'm going to be punished. And there'll be fines if I don't send them to school, right? And if I don't do all these things, there's a whole range of things that we are subjected to because we are subjects, digital subjects under the name. So
and inspiration also. Hold on. hold on, Arthur. An inspiration also, I think, comes from creating a living soul. Once you start removing those dull or layers of nonsense that you have, and that you start living truly from your art, from what your art takes you to take as action or whatever. I think it's your good art. Maybe that good art is also corrupt, but I think once you start to feel the living soul, like I was saying, I think it's the last one we had together. When I come here, I feel like, okay, it's me here, but the inspiration from to do this, or to even talk continually sometime for an hour long, I think come from creating a living soul, come from that soul that is probably not through this body always. It's hard to explain how I see this, but creating a living soul, I think, can give someone a lot of inspiration and a lot of guidance, which is what we're going like this in life. No guidance, no inspiration. So once I started to do this, to being more true to myself, I started to be very, very inspired. So that's, I think, the living soul that is in creation or in process. Maybe you can extend on this.
Well, it's the senses. See, everything you're sensing that you put the words process, well, you're not processing, but you're experiencing, are unique to you. Nobody else can impersonate what you sense. And that is it is in your senses, of your senses, that is who you really are. It is not the definitions that are spinning inside your head that define the experience of what you're sensing. Because when you default to that, you're defaulting to fantasy. And fantasy is telling you it's a daffodil and it's yellow. And it is this fake persona that we've raised up from the dead, because they gave us the name, the birth certificate, for us to construct a fake persona that will possess us. And the master puppeteers pulling the strings of the marionette can only control fantasy. As long as we are hooked to fantasy, as long as we are bonded in contract with fantasy, the occultists can manipulate fantasy. And because we are integrated into fantasy, our head is filled with alphabet thoughts that are definitions defining the worldview of fantasy, this other dream world that is not our living dream. So they cannot control the man. They can manipulate you. They could harass you. They could torture you. They could put you on the rack to try to break your will, to accept their definitions, to accept their authority, to accept their imposition of their world on you, and force you to kowtow to it. Right? But if you know who you are, you won't have your will broken. You'll never give in. Right? Because that's how it was before. That was how it was through those dark ages. That's how it all started, because eventually they had to break man down, because man was much stronger back then. Man was more bonded with reality. It's only through the generations of man possessed by fantasy producing children who come out in state of fantasy through the generations that we are now producing generations of very weak, transgendered, bastardized, pasteurized, homogenized children. And with our good hearts, we love them, because we're the only ones who know how to love them, even though they are an abomination, just as our mother raised us as their abomination. Because we are an abomination, because we are the devil incarnate. The devil being the dream of another man that we've accepted as our version of reality. And we live it through the name that we have, because the name ties us to the universe of the system of definition. So you hop in the vessel, in the car, and you journey through the information highway that maps out the roads. You've left the street number of the house you live in, which is in the universe of this matrix, full of names inside it, full of definitions, and you're on the road. But the road is maintained by all the slaves who are in the universe defining their job tasks and the payroll they receive, their wage status, because everything's defined through measurement. classifications, etc. So, you know, the whole system is built around exclusivity and privilege and haves and have-nots. So, you know, our good heart senses in poverty. It senses malnutrition. It senses injustice. It senses things wrong. But because fantasy is so much in control that only a tiny bit of us can see or sense anything. We don't know. We're so confused. We don't know how to dot the I's and cross the T's about the bigger picture. So it's so confusing, even for the occultists who have been inculcated with this tactic. It's been done to them. They're on all sides. This has happened because collectively, this dream, this universe I, is the all-seeing eye of the name on the journey of death. The destination is death on all sides. So we all play out the game of the system for all of us collectively to experience death. And without the collective effort from all sides of the duality of light and dark, good and bad, which is fantasy, it only happens in the realms of fantasy, that we can bring about such an outcome and cause such genocide at such scales that we've done before, where you see all the remains of all the ancient sites, which all went at the same time. There was no evolution or a carbon dating. And, you know, as we pointed out in I don't know if I mentioned in this video series, but you know, imagine if the system collapsed today, and in 100 years' time or 200 years' time, a few of these occultists continue running the script, and they start to use the alchemy again to begin this agenda by inculcating children. They say, oh, America, those lands was 40,000 BC. Those lands of now called Australia was 100,000 BC. Those lands over now we call Argentina was 10,000 BC. Those lands in Central America and southern United States, you know, where the Astors, Inca and Mayas, you know, remains, they say, oh, that was 26,000 BC. And so then you have this whole recorded history that comes with it all, because they don't want us to remember what really happened. And because the reality is they made up 1,000 years out of the last 2,000 years of recorded his story. The devastation happened roughly 1,200 years ago, sunrises and sunsets. That's when it happened, roughly. And all the his story has been designed to confuse everybody, because it was done to the occultists, because they're under the instructions of the inculcation coming from the grand architect, who lied to all of them, because he's the greatest liar of them all. He was a man who manipulated them into performing the lives as the occultists in the system, to inculcate all the others, to bring them into the duality of system authority, of you being a serf and them being your serf master, right? So in the system, as our heads go back through recorded history, because we've been inculcated through education, because we gave our child to Mrs. Occultist to educate our children through her representatives who will work for her schools and all that. Our children are told that that evolution happened, that we were squiggly things that evolved in a Neanderthal man that became man, right? They were told that the lying of carbon dating and all the history. They're told about a whole range of things to bamboozle us and mesmerize us in a world of definition that we don't know how else to dream, because every which way we turn, we have fantasy talking to us inside our heads through the alphabets, you see. So all recorded history up to 1780 AD in their recorded ages, because these ages are all made up. The calendar is all made up. All the time codes are fantasy. It's all a fantasy. So when you're reading history, you're reading through the eyes of the alchemists, the high priests of Freemasonry, and all their scribes and lackeys who recorded everything as definition. So even all the lives of the greats had to be defined. And in the definition, they can twist it, so that we're worshipping a kind of design framework that suits the outcomes of the occultists, which always is, let's everyone default to the system. We must default to the system all the time. We're chronically defaulting to the system So no matter what history you're reading, you default into the system. When you're reading all the philosophies of Plato and all the great Greek poets, you're defaulting to the system. When you're worshiping Greece and all its democracy, you're defaulting to the system. When you look at ancient Persia and ancient Egypt and ancient everything of the system, you're defaulting to the system. So when you look at dinosaurs, you're defaulting to the system, even though the whole thing of dinosaurs is bullshit, right? With Tyrannosaurus Rex, it never happened. It was plaster on Paris using bits and pieces to make them up. There were big creatures, mammoths and that, no doubt. And our ancestors were 30-something foot tall, pre the firmament collapsing. Everything was much bigger. But the point was the confusion, to raise up our children in this confusion, to give them a false sense of security, a false sense of heritage, a false sense of legacy, is only there to force them to worship the system that they are part of for the whole of their lives on the journey of their eternal death. Because that's the certificate.
Some have that sense of security and all that, like you said, but some have no sense at all.
Yeah, because the inculcation, they only know the definitions that are spinning inside their head. They've not been able to make a dream with their senses. They don't know how to dream through their sense because they're lost in nonsense. So what I'm pointing out, roughly 1780 AD, 99.99% of the total population of all of man, ever since this scam started, could not read and write anything to comprehend a definition, to be under the standing of a definition and perform the instructions of the definition. They had to be forced by will under the authorities of those who acted as landlords, land barons, right? Because they had the might, they had the army, they had the navy behind them, they had the enforcement of the Roman legions, etc., or the Greeks as Alexander the Great. It's always come with force, enforcement. And then you have this Pax Romanus. And the Pax Romanus is all the subjugated under the dominating occupier. And a peace treaty, but it's not peace. Because you're forced to live their dream world and work for their dream world. So the evolution to a covert system started roughly around the evolution of English, the 1100s through to its implementation to all serfs and commoners, took up to the 1700s of their recorded ages. But this is only in this 1,000 years, a few hundred years after the firmament collapsed, when everything was devastated in one blow, all across Earth. So when you get outside of this and you can sense this big picture, you'll see why they have gone to so much trouble to define such a vast universe that we call libraries of documented, recorded history of every man's ideas about what they've experienced and have written it down, right? Because that's what you're looking through. So even up to 1930 AD, still more than 90% of all the men across Earth could not read and write to record definitions. They couldn't do it. They may have had a tongue that they heard through their families and they were talking Hebrew or Latin or whatever tongue of the satanic occults that the subjugated tribe that they are born into under the Pax Romanus, because that's what happens. You're under the alphabet tongue of Pax Romanus. That's why all the Slavic tongues are under Pax Romanus. All the tongues throughout Europe, our alphabet tongues, are under Pax Romanus. They come out of Pax Romanus.
Was there ever a time in history, you think, where we were not in a fallen state? How far do we have to go back? That's someone asking that also in the chat.
That's an illusion. We're all gifted with it here and now. It's just a choice. Do you want to start connecting with your sense and expand that dream, that living dream, where your living soul is? Or do you want to continue rejecting it and forsaking it? You see, the confusion of the system, that is the supermarket where you have so many offerings coming at you. Look, the horrors and the disclosures behind chemtrails and Morgellons, the horrors vaccinations and aspartame and fluoride and chlorine and the horrors and lies that are being exposed behind politics and all that is to keep you embroiled in the definition of that defined matrix. So you never ever stick your head outside the whole fucking thing and realize the whole thing's a scam. Right? So that's why you got television, tell-lie-vision, right? Because the all-seeing eye is fantasy. We only see through fantasy. And while we see through fantasy, we default our lives under the Pax Romanus to the occupiers who are in power. And that's what the Australian flag is. That's what the American flag is. All the flags are of this one bloodline family ruling all of man across earth now. They're all from the houses of Europa. They all are coming from the same fucking bloodline. That's why George Bush Jr. and Diana Spencer are second cousins. Right? This is why so many actors today in mainstream come from this fucking bloodline abomination. And rock stars. And so many freedom truthers coming out like David Icke and Sasha Stone. They come from this bloodline. Same as Richard Branson. Same as Bill Gates. They will all be coming from this one tribe bloodline family. It's all that has ever been. The Pax Romanus is being under them. One fucking family. Like your family who decided to run this scam. It's always been about this. And that's why you see the sameness repeating everywhere. Why you see today, if you took photo shots of 50 different cities across Earth, it'd be hard to tell where you are because they're all wearing jeans and T-shirts. And they're
I was going to say that.
They've all got Metallica running around and they're all playing, you know, and they've got the voice running and you know, look, there's a reason behind it.
Look, go downtown Montreal, downtown Sydney, downtown Tokyo, will all look the same.
They all look the same. Exactly. There's a reason for this because this is how we're going to bring in the one world of fantasy. But it can't happen because it means death. Because you cannot continue the living under the original sin and continue perpetuating it. At some point, winter comes in. Autumn comes, winter collapses. The lie goes. And everyone who are living the lie, those in on it, manipulating everybody, censoring these videos, censoring and white-anting and ghosting all our work on Facebook, which they do. Very few people receive our notifications. Very few people are aware of the traffic that really does go on. So what I'm trying to point out to you, that your head is spinning in a dream world where your heart appears to be telling you this is true, what I am sensing. I can see the tree. I can smell the tree. I can smell the wife, the partner, the woman. I can smell and see and hear the forest and the trees. I can see the children playing. But we are so fucking lost in the inculcation of definitions that the Pax Romanus of the occupiers rules us completely because we see only through fantasy. And who we are is not here. We're not here anymore. So when you really wake up, you start to conquer fantasy.
You know, it's that problem we all have with the good hearts. It comes from if we grow up in a nice family and our parents are loving and kind to us, which most are generally, and so that is the start of our bond to the fantasy because they're living in the fantasy. So our natural feeling of coziness, of love, of warmth, of comfort, respect, all that comes from the fantasy world that we're living in. And this is, I think, where we can have this real confusion that, I mean, we don't want to say that someone's bad when they've given us love and comfort. And indeed, they were not intending to be bad. They were just doing what they were doing in the system under that guise of fantasy. But this is where the schism is, because we feel, even like I notice when making food for my children, even though I try to give them as much fresh stuff as possible and they still eat some cooked stuff, I've still recognized in me this feeling of association of warm food out of the oven with comfort and love. And yet it's not living anymore. There's no good in it. And yet that association, even after all the years of we've been eating raw, I still have that association of love coming out of the oven, when in fact it's death coming out of the oven. And that's the same with, that's why it can be really hard to, and that can be the winter coming in, when you have to face all these things and realize that all those things that you actually associated the love and comfort with are actually death and destruction. And so while we have, especially in the first world countries where most people have their house, they have a warm bed at night, they have enough food to eat, all that sort of thing, it's really hard to be able to point the finger and say, no, this is bad, because this is just the fact that I have a house to live in and a warm, comfortable bed, and I've got enough food in the cupboards, means that somebody else's life has to be made a slave for me to have that. And other people are missing out on that for me to have that. And this is where the real confusion is with, it's our good, we've experienced the good hearts in our lives through all that we have got through fantasy. Exactly, we've experienced the good heart through fantasy. So it's really hard to separate that feeling of what is comfortable and cozy with fantasy.
Because fantasy is a Christian with Christian morals. But fantasy will go and kill an animal who never gave you permission to kill and eat it, because the inculcation taught you, because your parents were inculcated to perform the ritual sacrifice of an animal, that we believe we need to eat it and kill it to live, and we celebrate it. You know, we are what Fiona's pointing out is what we're saying in these last two shows, one the other day and today, is that the good heart is confused, because now we're in a car, but the car is devastation to reality.
We're in the car driving to take food to the homeless shelter.
Yeah.
I mean, the irony of that is ridiculous. There is a homeless shelter because we are in our car and we drive a car and we support all the death and destruction that makes the car. So then we use all that death and destruction to help the homeless that are only homeless and poor because of everything of the car that we are driving. And that is in everything of our system lives. And this, we try and do good, but the backdrop to all of our doing good is death and destruction and murder. And then we wonder why nothing changes. We wonder why there's still poverty and homelessness, why there's still people suffering, why there's still pedophilia, why there's still all this stuff. It's because it's the very substance of our life. It's like, you know, just like this background here, it's a clutter, it's a mess, and it's all fantasy, and we're the living in front of it. But this is what's behind us, because this is the truth of the destruction that we're actually is the backdrop to our lives. So we can be living, and I can say, hey, look, we're living. I can feel him. I can feel me. We can tell that she's not, you know, real because she's just a doll, and this is all not real. But this is influencing everything about our living lives in the system.
And the other one is, we don't know where to pinpoint the enemy. We've been all the time, we're the fucking enemy.
Oh, I pointed it this morning. This morning I was saying that, sir. Hold on. This morning I was saying that exactly what you said. We have to know, recognize where's the enemy. It's not outside of ourselves. It's you. It's you. You are your own worst enemy. And just to make another point, when you were saying, Fiona, also about the baked goods coming out the oven, feeling all cozy and all good. The worst is when we cook at home, when we bake stuff in the oven and stuff, we don't add enzyme to the processed food that we're making. So on top of being no enzymes at all in it, it's very, very bad for you. And at least the people that do those kind of baked goods and industries and that, they add enzyme to it very often. So it's if you heat cookies, you better heat them in a box.
Well, the purpose of the enzymes is for the body to produce everything the body does, because our body creates everything. If we haven't kept whole, well, we haven't corrupted and distorted the living dream, we're breathing wholeness. Yeah. Right? The pollen, everything is rich and enriched, and it's pure. But our body, each of us being unique and original, our body will take and process each thing differently, and not one of us will ever be the same. Right? So there's no one shoe fits all when it comes to healing either. And that's all part of the same madness, you know. This is why, you know, when you're not comfortable living in the body of fantasy, you have to go to a psychologist, because psychologists got to help you, or the counselor got to help you to,
Or the
doctor help you to become comfortable in the body of fantasy. Because if there's any cracks or seams, you appear to be something abnormal.
Yeah, and if you really, really can't cope with the life of fantasy, you become a schizophrenic, or you have mental health issues and you're on the street. Whereas really most of those people, it's because they actually just cannot cope with the fantasy that they're being forced into. No, they're being squeezed. No, you have to fit into this. What do you mean you can't get up and go to work and get a job? What do you mean you can't cope with being on time and paying the rent every week? What do you know, what's your problem? Whereas really, probably those people are those who actually have most resistance to the fantasy, because they just cannot interact with it. They're just like, whoa, they cannot do the dance of fantasy.
But like you said, the stuff in the background is influencing your life, but also the circumstances you're in. That influence a lot your life, to take decision, to take the right one, or the one that you will take on a robotic state.
Exactly. So all around you, all you have is people, grown-ups, men and women, telling you that fantasy is the right way to live. Then what else are you going to know? And especially if for most children, they're not given enough exposure to the natural world. Most of them are in cities. So what are they going to think? How are they going to know any different?
They're all under the flag of Pax Romanus, right? They're all occupied. Their ancestors were conquered. The tribes were invaded by these occupying forces. Doesn't matter in what nefarious forms of infiltration happened from inside the tribe and from outside the tribe. The fact is, the tribe was conquered and assimilated and brought under Pax Romanus. And so we are living in a realm, in a dream world of fantasy, right? Look, we fall so in love. The marriage we have with fantasy and all around us, reinforcing it, the bond we have with it is with the devil, because fantasy is the devil, because it is not our living soul. And the word devil back to front is live, right? Live. We're not living.
Word evil back to front.
Yeah, evil. Exactly. You know, and the word devil is in that too. So the point is that, you know, we fall so in love with it that we're prepared to take our body as fantasy and slash the wrist and kill it, the body, because we're in love with fantasy. It's actually it's our vow with fantasy. It's our love, the seduction, the song of fantasy mesmerizing and enchanting us, lulls us to suicide.
And that's why we trash. That's why we trash our bodies with bad food, also with junk food and stuff from the fantasy, to feed the fantasy.
Yeah. We are so in love with fantasy, and that's why we're on the computers. Because while we use these computers, we're destroying reality. We have to rip out forests, remove tribes that were living in the forest peacefully. We have to do all kinds of horrific things. So not only we are the most wicked, we are the most wretched and the most evil imaginable, because while we worship fantasy, while we serve fantasy, while we live for the name in the system, every moment of our life is devastation to the living dream of man's life. We are committing suicide perpetually to the living soul, so that there is no semblance of any living memory of who we really are to live on with when fantasy is laid to rest, because it is fantasy that goes to the crematorium to be scorched and obliterated. It is fantasy that's laid in the cemeteries under the name. It's why there's a tombstone with the name. You remember the name, the definition. And all those who forget through the generation, once the name is no longer remembered, all those who died as fantasy, had no living soul, they all go too. Gone forever. So you only got one shot in this life. This is all to the occultists right now, or even the highest levels. You only have one shot. But to do something about it and correct it is to undo all the damage. Because you cannot run away from this, what you've done, what we've all done. And if we don't change our ways to become selfless, unconditional, where we no longer own anything, and we no longer sit in houses and lands and lots and plots and support the system with the laws of ownership and titles. Fantasy still rules supreme, and will bring fantasy into everything to perform the final outcome of why fantasy was dreamt into existence. Because its only purpose is death to who we really are, to each of us. And if you don't have a living soul, there will be nothing to move on with when your body's laid to rest. You gave it up. Very few make it. I'm telling you this now. Very few make it. More than 98% of the whole population of men, maybe more, are truly dying. And it's been like this for generations. We are in factory planet Earth, inside the production line, where the occultists are manufacturing fucking slaves. But there is no living souls. The only living souls that do exist keep incarnating in lives to try to end this fucking madness.
You know,
but there's not many of us.
I often wonder why we live this way, why all this is done to us, why are we in such a mess, and why everybody's blind, and why nobody cares, everybody's indifferent. What is like, because it's good to say, to go back in time and explain the trauma, but why in this day and age, with such tools at our disposition to wake up, we're still freaking dormant, and more than ever, can we, because I can hope for a dream for me, but my dream without the collective dream, or us waking up to the dream of life, or seeing better days later, means nothing. So can we hope one day to see like something
there's no hope to fix
or
this.
Are we destined
hope comes from fantasy. When you know who you are, there is no hope or faith or belief.
No, I know, but I mean collectively, me. Okay, I can talk about all my consciousness and all my divinity and that, but there is many people
there is no measurement to define the man. The lie is where you define the measurement of your potential divinity, of your outcome. This is all fantasy too. It's the power fantasy has over man is so staggering. It's beyond comprehension. This is why the living dream of Earth is almost to the point of extinction.
But that's
because we're so far gone. Yeah. Look, there is the real family was booted out even before we arrived in the womb. Our true family is not here. So there's no point relying on your family that you think is your real family to save you from this. There is no man out there to rescue you from this. Not a single man, including this man.
I'm born alone and I'll die alone. I always say it. I'm born alone and I'll die alone. I don't feel like
you have free will. You have free will. It's unlimited in scope. It is your choice. Do you want to have a living soul or not? And while your head is spinning with fantasy, with alphabets, you're fucking gone. You're choosing to die. There is no sense there. Your real family that we booted out is through sense. And we wouldn't harm our real family. We wouldn't do anything under misguided assumptions of our good heart to go and kill animals, and rip open mountains, poison the ocean.
When you start, hold on, that's why your real family is never really supporting you in any endeavor that you're going to take in life. It's rare that your parents are very, very supportive, or your brothers, like some will be in your journey, but it's rare that
I've watched
it happens
Fiona.
Spontaneously. It happens often. It happens after a certain success, attain a certain success, they're going to show up, but it's rarely like it's not normal. Like it should be normal that your family is there to support you, and we support each other and we encourage, and like we're so
in this processing of this waking up and comprehending that what really is going on, using our lives as guinea pigs. I had constantly, like I saw Fiona in the kitchen pulling things out of the oven, and I saw this cackling witch bringing out a bowl of fucking hell and putting it on the table for my children to eat. I saw this. I've seen my wife reading fairy tale stories to my children, and I was watching her destroying my children. That's what I saw. Because I'm seeing through my senses, I'm going, fuck, this is not my family. This is not my wife. I've married evil. But then I look at me and I'm thinking, fuck, I'm no different.
I'm just as fucked up. That's what I tell myself often.
The thing is this, the real waking up will not come from your family that you've been brought up, that Fiona explained to you. The fake security, the fake certainty, the fake infallibility of your family is not your family, because all that was defined to you is a lie. And your family is in the evil of the original sin, processing the curse. So that's, your family is not there. The potential for it was there, but it was forsaken. Now, we're generally speaking here, because we don't know, we cannot represent every man, woman, child of earth. But generally speaking, we can see the momentum towards annihilation happening all across earth, because every country has motor cars, have children going to school, have families eating cooked food, who go to the supermarkets and the shopping centers, who all wear the same sort of fucking clothes. You see the sameness through the music industry and the films and the movies appearing, and you see this collapse of the true cultures of the living man. So you know that a very high proportion of man has already died, and their children are already dead. Hence obesity and diabetes and all these other things that we are seeing before our eyes. But our good hearts go home to them, because we go home to the warlock of our father. We go home to the cackling witch of our mother. And we go home as the gremlins of Steven Spielberg's fucking inventions, because we are gremlins. We're all fucking gremlins. And we're nasty scum. We're evil, sick pieces of shit.
Liars and killers.
We are killers and murderers. We're wicked, because we think our good heart somewhere is there as fantasy. Somehow fantasy we've accepted as our good heart.
And we've become very complacent with our evil. You know, we each have our comfort zones of evil. So some people will happily eat meat, and others will say, no, I'm not going to eat meat because I care about the animals. But and some people will blatantly, they don't care how many hot rod cars they have, and other people try and use a bicycle because they're causing less pollution that way. But it is still just comfort levels of evil that we have. And I think this is also what happens a lot when people start waking up. They get to their comfort level of waking up where they can discuss all these evils, but they still actually don't take those next steps to go, okay, so what am I going to do about it? Or they do little things like they plant a garden, and again, that's the complacency that is their comfort zone of evil, because even planting a garden, as we have done, it's not the answer. It's a little step on the way, but it's not to stop here. You know, the garden is not the end, which is where a lot of people get trapped. I'll create a beautiful garden. Okay, good, I've done something. But no, that's only a step on the way, because for us to have our garden, we're still supporting the system of evil, because we go and we buy things for the garden. So we're still supporting the slavery. We're using tools that are made of metal. So we're still supporting the things. So it's all just about, even the waking up can be about our comfort zone, the complacency of our comfort zone with evil. And it can just stop there. And that's where we get stuck.
And we get stuck with, let's create an intentional community. Let's create an echo community, right? But they're thinking through fantasy with a good heart. So they must...
And this is still in the background.
It's still in the background. The whole fucking system. So we bring fantasy into echo community to stake what's in it for me, because the fantasy only thinks about what's in it for me. You've got to remember, this is processing the curse of the original sin. Everyone is still trapped in it, because they deny the uniqueness and originality of every man to have a living soul. That every child must be taken to be educated and brainwashed and be manufactured and processed and brought out as an instrument of fantasy for you to live your fantasy life. Everything that we default to is a world of fucking fantasy, because all are slaves for you to have your intentional green community, for you to have your universe of an afterlife, as the occultists believe. Right? That's what you've got to look at. That's what's going on before you all the time, every instant. How many more of man do we want to break and bring him under Pax Romanus as broken-willed, inculcated slaves?
Whoops. Arthur is frozen. How long is it gonna take before we wake up? That's the question. What is it gonna take for us to wake up? What is it gonna take? That's what I was thinking before this morning. I think I was talking about that. What is it gonna take? We're deeply, deeply traumatized, deeply fucked up. Me, that's when I realized in all this. Like I said to my wife, I'm starting to laugh about this because it's too like, if you don't take that with a bit of humor, and you'll be depressive. You'll end up depressive in life. So you gotta take this with life is still, after all the compromising that I'm in, that I realize that I even calling myself Tru-Mon is fantasy, but I'm compromised like everyone, but I'm conscious of this. It's not and and it's the intention behind. I don't come here saying that I have the truth and nothing but the truth, but I want to be true to myself. So calling the show Tru-Mon Show was a good opportunity for me to also align with what I want to become. It's true to myself. But anyway, that's just me, just my journey. There's a bigger journey and ongoing, and it's us comprehending. I think comprehending the whole picture, the big picture, because once you start to comprehend and like overstand, nobody should understand here. If you understand, you didn't get it. If you understand what Arthur said, you have missed the point. You have to overstand it. If you can overstand it like Shalom does, you have seen what he means. You have seen that the light inside the man. You have seen the light. You have seen his light transpire. But if you go there with your binoculars analyzing everything, and that's not the point. He's coming here to put a bit of light on in our very, very dark world. So it's up to us to see the light. When you have to see the light, it's the light of others. It's not only, and then you can see probably the light within yourself. Or hello from the UK, boom, rise and shine, shalom, shalom, got it. Overstanding. That's what we need. What do we need? Love, wisdom, and overstanding. Once we have comprehend this, once we have wake up our senses to start smelling the reality for what it is, and overstand this old overlay, or call it whatever you want, this matrix or this nonsense going on, you're gonna have made the shift. It's a total new paradigm for you. And that's what pretty much that I'm here for, is to get in touch with that new paradigm. I have discovered that I had a gift. We were all gifted to realize it.
We're back.
I think. You're back.
Computer
Okay. I was going. Me, I like to talk to me. I do this every day. So you can be gone for an hour. I would still be here yapping probably.
But I don't know where I was. I think the last bit was that we are all under the Pax Romanus, relying on everyone broken down. It is a civilization of captured man, converted through whatever means available to that society, to that nation. for you to run around as the instrument of fantasy entering echo community, because the echo community is under Pax Romanus. The Christians who believe in the new earth will be under a new Pax Romanus, another version. Sorry, they'll be under another system where the Pax Romanus of this one family tribe continues. So this is what
order. It's a Pax Romanus.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got to get your head around this, that your head is spinning with inculcation to keep you distracted from who you really are, that is your living soul, that hasn't been nurtured and expanded on, where the flame has been put out for most, right? And we're running around talking and thinking as fantasy, dreaming reality as fantasy, wanting a green earth, a one earth, a world of peace of all amongst our brothers and sisters. But this is all fake, because the peace is contrived. It is not a living peace that comes from the living dream of the living soul of the man. It is an outcome of performance derived from emotion. See, the happiness is not a happiness. It's not natural. It's fake. It's contrived. The joy, the peace,
Also
the abundance.
That's a good point you make there. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but that's a good point you make there about happiness, because I was just talking about that the other day, I think. Yeah, we all say happiness is a state of mind, but for me, being happy would be to have happiness outside in the world also. If I can only achieve personal happiness, what kind of happiness is that? Like, it's fake. It's fake. It's not real. So we're all talking about happiness, being happy, and this and that, being very, very selfish about it, because where it's only our own little self-happiness. But the world is gone astray, and if everybody has lost their way, no, there's suffering, we're killing each other, but we have to be happy. This is what I don't get. It's all fake.
We make shapes in the water of our breath, but these shapes are not our dreams. They're not inspired from our living dream. These shapes of happiness are contrived shapes. So we perform the happiness under the Pax Romanus. You see, we perform the peace under the Pax Romanus, but it is contrived, because we're educated into the definitions of what it is to be happy, or what it is to be joyful. And they come with materialism and consumerism, because they are the trinkets of fantasy that keep us entangled, like the baby in the crib looking at all the things that are above it. And it's mesmerized, hypnotized by these things, because the occultists do not want you to wake up to the living soul, because you cannot lead someone to happiness. There's no look, happiness is not a destination. Neither is life a destination, or freedom, or peace, or consciousness, or truth. None of this. Life is not a destination.
Hold on. Life is the leading cause of death.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
It's really an abuse of life.
There is no real happiness. Really, happiness does not even exist, because the happiness that we feel in the system is set against that backdrop of the system of suffering, which means really our happiness is only as a result, in a way, of the phew, I don't have to be at work now, so I can sit in the garden and be happy. Phew, I've got a house that I love because it's a lovely place to be, so I can be happy. But that is set against the backdrop of, we know that we are one of the fortunate ones who have a house, not one of the ones who are on the street.
Yeah.
So happiness, if we were living in nature with no system, we would not even know about happiness. Happiness wouldn't even be something that we thought about, because we already are, and there would be no contrast to be happy. No, because happiness is only a concept, because we have a mantra, because we have the sadness and the suffering as a backdrop. If there was no sadness and suffering, because we're living among nature and everything's taken care of, we don't need to be happy because we don't have that contrast that we're fighting against. So happiness, in fact, does not exist. And this is why so many people in the system, they spend their whole life looking for happiness, or I'll be happy if, I'll be happy if, I'll be happy when, and it never happens because happiness is a fantasy.
The happiness is a melody in your head. You realize that the happiness is a melody in your head, because the constructs and concepts of, for an example, diamonds are a girl's best friend.
We were talking about
right
this.
now. Imagine the diamonds are a girl's best friend. Now, most of the diamonds came out of South Africa, and the marketing campaign was built to bring it into the Western world heavily to market this ocean of diamonds out of South Africa. Right, and then you got movies with these key phrases, like with Marilyn Monroe and that singing "Diamonds are a girl's best friend." Now, you know, it's fantasy, you know, where Mr. Fantasy comes to Mrs. Fantasy and says, "Darling, I love you. Will you marry me?" And put a hand, and I bring this diamond and I put it on her finger. And the real Fiona is, oh.
Did your dog hate the nose of the puppet, or what happened with the nose?
Old.
She's very old.
She's really old.
Okay. She's just wearing away.
It was made by a woman. It's a long story, another history to this one.
But no, she's been around for more than 20 years.
Oh, more than that.
So.
She's like 40 years old, more or even more.
So
anyway, long story cut short.
People find her scary.
She is a bit scary.
Yeah.
I don't find. I find she has her charm. She has her charm.
People should be scared of everyone.
You know what? There's nothing. There shouldn't be nothing scary in the world and nothing ugly. Like ugly, that's another concept to find someone ugly or this thing ugly, or like that's another definition.
Mm-hmm.
So she's not ugly. She's not ugly.
We have no emotional attachment to someone else's outcome about how she looks. It just goes right over our heads. We don't have any. I don't have any association.
No, but that's why I've never mentioned it. But it's just someone saying it. I wanted to have your reaction for it.
We knew that people would make comments about this. It was obvious before we even used it.
We wanted to use a Barbie doll, but we didn't even have a Barbie doll in
the
house.
Well, we do have one somewhere hidden, somewhere buried.
I think she was gone, but
Barbie Ken and
we have Wendy.
But anyway, but the thing is, the association with the mantra of the diamond as being a girl's best friend, and the ritual that comes with it, with engagement and then marriage, and and all that magical mystery. Basically, it's that Beatles magical mystery tour where we're on the journey of the engagement with the diamond, right? Is no different to you seeing a Coca-Cola commercial with all the young kids jumping up and down the sand dune mobiles, and celebrating the happiness and joy outside. Right, but with association to Coca-Cola, which means it's a default to the system, so it's a contrived happiness. So you've got this kind of mantra, this hypnotic suggestion, coming at us, sentence after sentence, paragraph after paragraph, all day, every day, because the English language is this mantra, singing its song of fantasy. And we glorify it. And that's what we do now when we're thinking about eco community. And we must solve our world problems and all that stuff, because it will come through the song of fantasy. It will not be the living soul of the man, because the man ain't there. The living soul of the man ain't there. He's not caught up in it. He's not part of the machine. You see, so...
Richie, it's Richie that makes me laugh in the chat. He keeps on with the puppet. So that's why I'm laughing, because they're fine. They find her very cute.
Just a tool.
Yeah, she's just a tool.
You can
no, but apparently we would have a bigger audience too if you would leave her in the cupboard.
A living man has no audience. Yeah. This is the truth. And people who use their senses will sense everything. And realize the motives and intentions behind what we do. So people who have emotional effects by this shows you how powerful fantasy is running. If this fantasy can press their fantasy button and they're reacting, giving energy to the conversation about a doll, it shows you how deeply fucked up they are. Right? Mm-hmm. So this is the same with that guy with the flat earth stuff that happened on that show weeks ago. We get so embroiled in fantasy where we give our energy to something that cannot go anywhere but feed the grid of the system, because we're in the information highway of the system, right? You're in the information highway of the system right now. You're in a terminal. This terminal is called the Tru-Mon show. But the information highway journeys from the Tru-Mon show to Facebook, to Google. And there are many terminuses, many terminals, thousands, millions, which are collection points taking your life force energy to feed the occultists who are behind the grid, to give them the power to continue making sure everyone has fantasy as their demonic possession. Because if you have a name and you live that name, you are possessed by fantasy. Who you are does not exist. And it's easy to prove it. Because if you have a living dream, there will be no alphabet thoughts in your head. And there'll be no nonsense pulling you into action to carry out instructions, be it mischief, distraction, confusion, disorder, disrespect. It goes on and on and on and on and on. It's so easy to see the evidence of the mark of the beast, because that's what fantasy is. So even when we end this show, just how deep is one's life still in the grid of the information highway of the matrix of this fucking lie? Right? Because we get up and go to the tap. You get the bill coming in the mouth of the water that came out of the tap. You're going to hop in the car or the push bike. How far are you prepared to break it and end this? End it. Because nothing else will change unless you do it.
But this is where our responsibility comes in play. And we have to take ownership and responsibility for our life and create the living soul. The message is simple.
We make this very clear.
Yeah.
Not a single man can enter the true paradise bringing this with them. Not a single man on earth today will make it.
It's
if
like
they still hold on to this.
It's like chasing a dream.
It's all over.
Yeah.
Very few will make it. Very few will make it. They will not know who they really are because there's nothing there to censor it with. They never created it.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And the arrogance and the indifference and that comes with fantasy, and the ridicule and the abuse and the dismissals that all come with fantasy, and all the bullshit that one's conversation has with their fantasy, because it is fantasy that talks. It's fantasy that thinks and dreams and lives. Because that's what you are. That's what we are.
So, time to remove the mask.
These videos, the reason this man intentionally did these videos with you, there's a reason for this, is that there's not a single man on earth today that cannot turn around and say they are not aware of the truth this man brings to you. It is up to each man to inspire another man of the truth of what this man shares with you. Because this is not the first time this has happened. And the point I'm trying to say to you is that there's not all the censorship, all the discrimination, and all those behind it. This truth is for them too. They cannot turn around and say they did not know of what would become of them if they ignore the truth. Because the consequence is before you now. And which way you choose to go is up to each of us. Right? Because you have free will. You're gifted with everything of the creator of this living dream to create a living soul. It is up to you to fix it now. And if you don't, there will be nothing to remember the life you have. You're
That's
not
what
infallible.
I say that often. It's either you do some. What I said today on Facebook, I said, don't be fake, or you'll end up a flake.
Exactly.
That's what's gonna happen if you're fake. Yeah, you can
watch
end
out
up.
how people reinterpret things and twist things and twist it. You get a lot of people out there trying to twist what this man shares with you, what this living woman shares with you. We don't own the truth. We gift it freely.
You share insights. You share insights with us.
Turn around and say one day that you did not know.
And our part in this, like I said before, Arthur, our part in this also is to understand what you're saying, not understand. Like if people understand you, they didn't get it. They didn't get it at all, at all. It's not about understanding. It's we have to understand what you're saying. And to understand, it's a whole different concept. Whole different, not a concept because I don't like concept, but it's a whole different way of seeing things.
These videos we've made with you, Johnny, the ebook that will come and the documentary that will come is for the occultists. It's only for the occultists. Because if we're going to bring Rome and Babylon down, it will be them fleeing it. All others who come to this, it will be their free will, of their free will choice, as living brothers and sisters who bear the torch of the truth. Right?
Yeah.
And that's the only way it can be. We're not here to judge you, to judge anyone. But there is a price to pay if we flaunt this and think that somewhere deep behind us, we're infallible. Use scrutiny. Contemplate. Where did the thoughts come from in your head to make you an occultist? Where are all these definitions derived from? Who benefits from these definitions that you empower and make shapes in the water of your breath, where every other occultist is making the shapes in the water of man's breath? That has formed the dead world of the system with its education, right? And its schools and its media centers and technology. Because all of it is illusion, it's fantasy.
Where soul murdering is occurring day after day after day, and no one see it. No one cares. No one cares. No one seems to care. That's the thing. I think we're becoming so deep in that fantasy that we're falling in love, really falling in love with the fantasy. Falling because that's not rising in love. You rise in love with the dream of life, and you fall in love with the fantasy. Boom. That's it. We got
those who are healed of fantasy will remain. All those who don't, the Grim Reaper of their own dreaming will kill them. All of them will go. They've got one shot at it. There's only one shot at it now. And this video, even whoever's watching, there's a bigger audience out there of people who do watch these things. You don't know who's watching these videos, right? Because they like to keep their cloaks up and the mysteries of behind the scenes. But the fact is, the truth is there now. It's clear as daylight. And it shows, and we've shown you how it works, how it truly works. And there is no confusion whatsoever in the information we've shared with you. And there is a direction we've provided, but it's not following us. It's just to show you how to navigate out of nonsense.
Someone says here, occult means hidden. How can people be occultists if they know nothing about it? Occult means hidden. Are we not all in hiding?
We are hiding from
Hello?
Sense. We
That's
are not.
What it is. We're all in hiding. For sure,
See,
we're occultists.
The occult is definition, but we don't sense the lie that is the definition. So it gets buried, and so it is hidden.
Yeah. Anyway,
and that is where all occultists have been deceived, because they aren't able to sense anymore.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Anyway, you have something else to add, Arthur or Fiona?
You know, listen, was it?
That was a very good insight. Like I say always, it's insight that we share. We don't come here to research fame or to become famous on the internet. Like, I wish I would be in a food forest, climbing on a tree, or getting coconuts and smoking my big joint on the side of the beach and living. Now I am compromised into a system, and that's it. That freaking doll that we have to let go. And but me, the doll is pretty much like the fear. I think also the moment where you start separating from that puppet, it's the moment you start killing your fears, conquering your demons. The puppet start to go, and you start to free like a bird. You know, when you say open the cage, let the birds fly. That's what we gotta do. Spread our freaking wings and fly, people. Fly away from, because they're mad people.
Either we're creating the living dream and expanding that, or we're not. Thinking it ain't going to do anything. You know, living in the dream world of definition will not do anything. We're only perpetuating the system because the background of the system is still there. The Pax Romanus continues. Do you, and are you willing to break Pax Romanus? Because you've got to stick your head up above the fog of fantasy, where all the occultists can now see you, because you're now no longer buried in the mist of all the lying, where everyone is lost in the matrix of those information highways. Now they're seeing you. Yeah. Now, you are their greatest threat.
I hope.
Now, well, they are.
They see me as a threat.
Fantasy. They love fantasy. Fantasy is their god. Their god of death. They worship fantasy, because that's what Lucifer is. Lucifer is the light of the intellect. The definition is Lucifer, and it forms the intellect of fantasy. And when you talk through the intellect, it is raising up fantasy as the conversation. But in doing it, you have become possessed by the man who dreamt this for you.
Especially if you speak English.
And so all the illumination of Lucifer
or French
are alphabet thoughts.
French is as bad as English, I think, for the programming and all that stuff.
They're all the same.
They're all the same. There's no exit door that you're going to find in the system. Wherever there is a definition, it's there to maintain you trapped in it. You'll never get outside of it.
The Babylonian trap. I've been talking about this before. Don't fall for the Babylonian trap. They're all over. We got to be conscious. We got to be even rise above consciousness. We got to rise above all definitions, all defined state, all nonsense, and reinvent.
What rises up, Johnny? What rises up is undefined man.
That's it.
Which means that the man is not reliant on another man's definition to rise up out of it.
Exactly.
Because if we do that, we're rising up this again. Yeah. Right? Because that's what the system is. It's just a dream of another man, and everyone got sucked into it. And they've been living this dream ever since. And so the evolution of that lie is the curse. And everyone who lives this lie, it's easy to see because they have a costume and a title. They've got a name.
Yeah.
And they live the life of that fantasy under the Pax Romanus in a war zone. Right? It's so easy to see who they are because it's everywhere. It's in your family. It's amongst your brothers and sisters. It's in your next door neighbors.
It's everywhere.
It's in your community. None of them are going to free you from this.
Be the change. That's one of the solutions.
None of them will free you from this, you see. So it's a discipline. It's a real discipline to recognize the sense and to run with that sense, which is undefined. We can only show you the trickery of what it isn't what you sense, because we can't tell you what you sense. We can only show you what you don't sense and reveal the lie of that.
Yeah, because you cannot make me sense things, so you can point me the nonsense, and then I can realize, oh yeah, that's true. Stuff I cannot sense. Space. Where it's that's what I did with that flat Earth stuff. That's what it did to me. At one point, I was like, okay, there's no space. That's true. I cannot sense this. Where can I experience that? It's just stuff they told me, and the round stuff, the round planets, and all CGI shit. I'm like, So that's what happened when you get pointed to the nonsense. You start realizing that really is not stuff you can sense, and you're just being packed with lies. There,
Johnny, while there is a definition that we are performing, we are lost.
Yeah.
And you've got to sit and contemplate on this and realize how impregnated we are, and how many different ways we get sucked in because of all the conspiracies and uproars of injustice that get played out through social media and television and news, with invasion and war. All these things are to keep you in the realm of definition, to keep you in the dream world of fantasy.
To keep us on a hamster wheel. It's like a hamster wheel.
When you wake up, nothing affects you anymore. Not Palestine, anything. Because unless you return to reality, there is no reality expanding that stops all this mayhem and madness. It will never stop until there's nothing. Meaning we have created mass genocide of all our brothers and sisters, and only a few of us who know who we really are will remain and sense where we need to be with all our ancestors and all those of the living dream, of the living soul. So that's what we got to get our heads around, because watching these videos is not enough. Going to the garden is not enough. Growing food and doing things under permaculture is not enough. There's no remedy in it.
No.
Because the definition continues. Because you are still sucking on the nipples of definition. You're still bringing the system with you into everything that you do. But a real man who's arisen up above this fantasy doesn't need another man for the man to live and be what that man is uniquely. The man is not reliant on another slave for this man. And that's where the truth is. So anything where you're still dependent on another man, you're still in Pax Romanus, under the enforcement, means you're still scared. You're still frightened. You're still ignorant, still arrogant, still jealous, still deeply in love with fantasy, and don't want to let it go.
Well, thank you very much, Arthur, Fiona. Pleasure again. We're going to see each other sometime soon, I'm sure.
It's in the dream. Just to wind this up for this man, it's in the dream of living the sensory reality and expanding that, where we change everything. So with those who want to come and visit us, they need to hold the dream, why we're doing what we're doing. So when they come here, they don't have this confusion with fantasy between us and them, and then leading to paranoia and argument and all kinds of crap that has nothing to do with us and was never here on offer, because they brought it with them. They arrived with it. So when you create a remedy, you've got to be aware of this. You've got to be aware of how fantasy works. And you've got to learn to be able to say no to fantasy and be able to confront your brothers and sisters. Because in working together, fantasy needs to be weaned out. Because you've got fantasy in the conversation still going on. So that's why we created the mudroom. So these videos and the remedies are there. It's not the only remedy. But to comprehend the bigger picture is critical, which you do when you go through our work.
Yeah. Because
that can inspire you. The uniqueness and originality of your living soul, to not recreate another version of the system under Pax Romanus, using the good heart and saying, this is the paradise of echo community. And yet everyone comes with their own money. All those who don't have money have no exclusivity and privilege, right? So all those, everyone's discriminating. Unless you've got money, you can't come into this echo community to buy into it. Because everyone's got everything else staked out. It's showing you the whole thing's fucked from the beginning. I mean, what's the real wealth between a woman who's 80 years old who's got one leg and one arm, who spent 60 years working with children, working in gardens with that purity, what value do you place on that woman and a man who comes, a young man who comes with $50 million? Where's the true value?
By the woman.
Because I can tell you, the real woman will go further with me than the man who comes with 50 million.
Yeah.
Because the man will come with a lot of this. And a lot of complications that come with it.
We put value on time. We put value on time, not money. Real people that do real things in life, put the value on time. It's like you give me money to... I take my time to go paint a school or whatever in the neighborhood to help someone. Or I give money to a charity. You're going to say, fuck, he took a week of his time to go paint. That's more valuable. It's that time. We must... That's why when you called me, I'm always willing to give my time. That's what it's all about.
We like doing this because the thing going back to this again. When we wake up, we are the laborers of truth. We are the recreators of paradise. We're busy all day, every day, co-creating and expanding the living dream. Our job is to wean out fantasy, to remove fantasy in every area, so that we are able to produce generations of children who are not brought up with fantasy. So those of us who wake up are not thinking about what's in it for me. The ones who really wake up, they sacrifice everything. They're the last in the line. It's like that picture of the wolves that Scott put up, that whole line of wolves. And the leader of the pack was right out the back, because of all those observed the wolves all that time, right? And the ones at the front were the more older ones who were also, to be protected by the whole middle one. There's a whole sort of hierarchy thing. You see, there is no first or last with nature. It's not about survival of the fittest. It never has been with nature in that way. It's maintaining the purity and sincerity of the living dream that they are, as the wolf, as the snail, to maintain that magnificence. And when everything of nature is doing that, which is what nature does, the dream of life, the magnificence of purity and sincerity is present in present sense always. So as we, as the children, arrive to this present sense, we're experiencing the magnificence of that, right? We're not interfering. We're not fucking it. And the children who get brought up like this, with us not being inside their heads, experience this magnificence. And that makes them dream greater than even the creator of the living dream of life. An undefined creator we're talking about, of an undefined, non-measured, non-lineal dream of man's life. Because that's the truth. It's non-lineal, non-defined, undefined.
Undefinable.
So watch out for definitions. Watch out for people, because the deception is so powerful. And we call them family. We call them community. Don't go to them and looking for hope that they're going to wake up and rescue you to help you with your dream. You don't have any attachment to them. You must let the dead go and bury themselves. This includes your mother and father, your families. You must let them have peace by you having peace with them, and not to go to war with them over the truth, because you cannot save them. You cannot save them with a definition. Because if you go to them and hammer them, you're hitting them with definitions, which puts them under you, which makes you no different to the grand architect who started this fucking madness. You see, so we can only inspire the bigger picture, to inspire brothers and sisters to return to nature, to co-create and expand the living dream. But there is no ownership. There's no possession. Nothing.
Yeah.
There's no audience, because every man is God, embodying the creator, because it means full responsibility of the living dream that we hold as our living soul. So when you see through the eyes of your senses, you're sensing the living soul of the living creator of man, as the mountains, as the creatures, as the insects, as the magnificence of everything, undefined. And we're gifted with that.
Yeah.
So, you know, those who want to get involved with us, can't come in to think that we are some kind of a cult. Because what we'll have actually waiting is baseball bats to deal with this.
It's like a therapy.
So you're most welcome to have. We have most welcome people to come and visit us. To come and we'll put a shovel in their hand.
That's it.
And they can bring fictional dollars into this. But
They
the
all
intention
have a puppet.
is to end this, and the videos we post and share and all that is this truth. It's best that you put a mask over this man, put a fucking blackout, and just use the information as unsourced for you.
Yeah.
Because that's all that matters.
That's it. In the
Return to the living.
information. Love is information also, and that's what you're giving here. Lots of info, lots of insight. So thanks everyone in the chat. Again, the chat was on fire. Literally. Itchy Rich was find your puppet very, very funny. I didn't even made association with nothing. I just saw something, and I have no really views on analyzing what was in your end. It's just a puppet for me. It's a marionette.
Remember, it's not a puppet, it's your name.
Marionette.
Your name is this.
Yeah, that's it.
Right now. Jean-Luc Lunaire is this.
Yeah, Tru-Mon also.
Is this.
I know the trauma.
Is this.
I'm here to kill the trauma, to liberate myself from the mental slavery, but I don't know if I'll ever let go of a... I don't think I'll ever let go of Tru-Mon. That's what keep me sane. That's what keep me sane in an insane world. So until the world become all sane, I'll have to remain a bit like
it
this.
Will never happen, bro. That will never happen.
But that's it. So I'll always have a little touch of insanity, but at least if I can control it and do it with love and good vibration and bring joy and not happiness, because happiness is just... but if we can hold the joy is very important in the moment, to eventually that we can be more inspired, all of us. That's all about being inspired, because the life is not very complicated. It's about, making a shift inside of ourselves, moving out that default state, like we say all the time, and make a shift. But it's up to us. It's up to us to take responsibility. We can point fingers outside. I think we have all kinds of enemies outside of ourselves and this and that. But it's up to us to check ourselves. We must check ourselves and realize where the enemy is. And that's it.
I end this, Janik, I end this. Directing the good heart into the invisible cage only keeps the invisible cage going.
That's it. That's great.
So unless we end the good heart directed into the invisible cage, we will always have the invisible cage. And it will never, ever leave us. So the responsibility is to collapse it, to fuck it off, exactly. Which means to stop being misled by our good hearts, directed into the invisible cage to perpetuate it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there is no remedy.
That's it.
There's no relief.
So thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah.
The cult, seriously, the cultists will be laughing their heads off. They'll be sitting on their comfy leather sofas, sipping cognac, spitting to their roaring fires, screaming out in laughter at you, at everyone who continues using their good heart to prop up the invisible cage.
Okay, we're out.
All right.
See ya, people. We're out.
Next, whatever season. All the best. Bye, everyone.
That's it. I love you all.